WikiLeak Hillary leaked emails reveal Hillary Clinton's life of deceit. Among the many telling kernels of truth dappling the spoor of the Hillary Clinton campaign, internal emails released by WikiLeaks this past week is one immediately leaped out. Quote, "Politics is like sausage being made. It is unsavory, and it always has been that way, but we usually end up where we need to be. But if everybody's watching, then people get a little nervous, to say the least, so you need both a public and a private position," end quote. The sausage maker was Mrs. Hillary Clinton giving one of her $225,000 speeches that she so long sought to conceal from the public, in this instance to the National Multi-Housing Council in April 2013. It came at a time when the just-retired Secretary of State was coyly gearing up for the White House run, little tin cup at the ready, raking in nearly $1 million a month alone. When her ode to pragmatic two-facedness was called out by Donald Trump at last week's debate, she lamely blamed it on Abraham Lincoln, as portrayed in Steven Spielberg's 2012 film. Never mind that a high-priced collection plate and the passage of the 13th Amendment have little in common. It's in a day's work for a woman who claims to be for the little guy but spends most of her time frolicking with the political and financial elites. Then again, Hillary has long believed that the personal is political, especially when political power can benefit her personally. Indeed, as the email shows, her public career has been based on showing one face to her gullible supporters and another face, a more ruthless one, to allies and adversaries behind closed doors. So let's review that evidence. 13 years after she and Bill left the White House in 2001 dead broke, quote-unquote, Hillary regaled the well-fed bankers and financial managers at Goldman Sachs and BlackRock Inc. with tales of her humble lifestyle before she and Bubba learned how to spin the dross of public service into the finest gold access and protection money can buy. Quote, "I do think there is a growing sense of anxiety and even anger in the country over the feeling that the game is rigged. And I never had that feeling when I was growing up. I mean, were there really rich people? Of course, but we had a solid middle-class upbringing. And now, obviously, I'm kind of far removed because the life I've lived and the economic, fortunes that my husband and I now enjoy, but I haven't forgotten it," end quote. Forgotten that those fortunes, quote-unquote, came from the very rigged she was supposedly decrying. As Secretary of State, Hillary had to deal with lots of unsavory characters, but sometimes their natures were made sweeter by their touching thoughtfulness towards the Clintons. Qatar, like most Muslim countries, treats women as second-class citizens, but champion of women Hillary never lets a little thing like that stop her from doing business. See on favors. And a far greater threat than murderous Muslims adhering to a fanatical 7th century religious ideology lurks right here at home. Those pesky Roman Catholics and their silly 2,000-year-old faith. See on Catholics. The bigotry shown by her campaign aides is a hint of what's to come under a Hillary administration. Continuing pressure on Catholics to adapt to contemporary, quote, progressive, end quote, social justice norms. Not that she's likely to put it so bluntly, especially during the campaign. That might alienate potential Catholic voters, after all. But universal brotherhood. That's the real Clinton goal, right? Privately, you might have to stroke a few brows from time to time, see needy Latinos. But far beyond the Rio Grande, there's a potentially much wider electorate to appeal to when the time is right to admit it. Quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders, sometime in the future with energy that is as green and sustainable as we can get it, powering growth and opportunity for every person in the hemisphere," end quote. Ignore the feel-good boilerplate about green energy in the quote above, delivered in the 225,000 speech to the Brazilian Banco Itaú in New York City, May 2013. Emails from mid-2015 show her trying to defend her previous support for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but ultimately rejecting it publicly for populist political reasons, for now. In short, don't expect any mea culpas when the time is right for a 180-degree spin. For a Clinton is never wrong, merely evolving. The distinction between the public and private Hillary is masked partly via her cozy relationships with reporters. Whether her aides are planting stories with sympathetic journalists, sneaking a peek at debate questions in advance, or just keeping their ear to the ground, quote, I just wanted to make sure John Podesta had a heads up that his name will be in a story concerning the White House ethics policy, which could run on Monday, end quote, wrote Washington Post White House Bureau Chief Juliet L. Perrine in a March 21, 2015 email to the Obama staffer. In the public eye since 1992, the Clintons have long memories, rewarding their friends and punishing their enemies, swatting away annoying flies like Bill de Blasio, quote, should we care about this? End quote. Wondered Podesta privately in response to political suggestions from the mayor, whose aid they don't need. Like the Bourbon monarchy, they've learned nothing and forgotten nothing. Unsuccessfully floating the idea in late 2014 of changing the date of Illinois 2016 primary, current campaign manager Robbie Mook wrote to Podesta, quote, this is not an Obama ask, but a Hillary ask, and the Clintons won't forget what their friends have done for them, end quote. Nor, it goes without saying, what their enemies have done to them, and certainly not what they're going to do to us should they win next month, but that's private for now. The Clintons never forget. In November 2014, Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, emailed Clinton campaign chair John Podesta about the urgency of pushing a bill to move the Illinois primary out of March to stop momentum from a moderate Republican candidate. Illinois was offered, quote, a bonus of 10% extra delegates if they moved to April and 20% if they moved to May, end quote, but didn't change the date as it had already done so in 2008. Quote, our preference would be for them to move all the way to May, but if at least moved to April's 12th or April 9th, they will have the day to themselves and presumably garner a lot of coverage, end quote. This is what Robbie Mook wrote. They will also be influencing a bigger Northeast primary day on April 26th. Quote, they don't really care about being helpful and feel forgotten and neglected by POTUS, Mook wrote, adding, the key point is that this is not an Obama ask, but a Hillary ask, and the Clintons won't forget what their friends have done for them. On having two personas, quote, you just have to sort of figure out how to balance the public and the private efforts that are necessary to be successful politically, and that's not just a comment about today. I mean, politics is like sausage being made. It is unsavory, and it always has been that way, but we usually end up where we need it. But if everybody's watching, you know, all of the backroom discussions and the deals, you know, the people get a little nervous, to say the least, so you need both a public and a private position. This is a quote by Hillary Clinton in a leaked speech to the National Multi-Housing Council, April 2013. Now, concerning favors, quote, Qatar would like to see WJC, that's William Jefferson Clinton, for 5 minutes in New York City to present a $1 million check that Qatar promises for his birthday in 2011, end quote. This is a quote by Ami Desai, Director of Foreign Policy for the Clinton Foundation, wrote in 2012 email. Now on de Blasio, early 2015, when Mayor Bill de Blasio contacted the campaign about his progressive agenda plan to organize progressives nationally to take on income inequality, he wrote, quote, I believe you will agree with much of this content. Please let me know if you want to discuss, end quote. The email response from Clinton campaign chair John Podesta was, quote, "Should we care about this?" "I'm not sweating it," replied Neera Tandem, the president and chief executive of Center for American Progress, who explained to Podesta that, quote, "Politically, we are not getting any pressure to join this from our end." End quote. The dream of open borders. Quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders, sometime in the future with energy that is as green and sustainable as we can get it, powering growth and opportunity for every person in the hemisphere," Hillary remarks from a leaked speech to Banco Itaú in May 2013. Concerning the needy Latinos, "A few calls you might consider making," John Podesta wrote to Clinton in an email with the subject line, "Needy Latinos," and "one easy call." On Catholics, referring to a New Yorker article about News Corp executive chairman Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Post, New York Post, which stated he is raising his kids Catholic, Clinton aide John Haplin wrote in an email, quote, "Friggin' Murdoch baptized his kids in Jordan, where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Many of the most powerful elements of the conservative movement are all Catholic. Many converts from the Supreme Court and think tanks to media and social groups. It's an amazing bastardization of the faith. They must be attracted to the systematic thought and severely backwards gender relations and must be totally unaware of Christian democracy," end quote. Palmieri, director of communications for Clinton campaign, responds, "I imagine they think it is the most social acceptable political conservative religion. Their rich friends would understand it if they became evangelicals," end quote. On Putin, Putin says, "I would love if we could continue to build a more positive relation with China," Clinton said during a speech to Goldman Sachs June 4, 2013. In the same speech, she said, "Obviously, we would very much like to have a positive relationship with Russia and would like to see Putin less defensive towards a relationship with the United States so that we could work together on some issues. One time I was visiting with him in his dock outside of Moscow, and he was going on, and just listing all of the problems that he thinks are caused by the United States." Quote, Clinton said, quote, "I said, Mr. Prime Minister, we actually have some things in common. We both want to protect wildlife, and I know how committed you are to protecting the tiger." I mean, all of a sudden he sat up straight, his eyes got big, and he goes, "You care about the tiger?" End quote. Out of touch. Quote, "I am not taking a position on any policy, but I do think there is a growing sense of anxiety and even anger in the country over the feeling that the game is rigged. And I never had that feeling when I was growing up. Never. I mean, we were really rich people, of course, blah, blah, blah. We already wrote that. We already went into that. Now, CNBC host John Harwood to Podesta in an email about Clinton interview on CNN. "She looks so much more comfortable talking to Andrea Mitchell today than to Brianna Kalar a few weeks ago." Podesta was thankful for the journalist's opinion, responding, "I think she's over the hump." Clinton's director of communication, Jennifer Palmieri, also appreciated Harwood's help when he emailed her the suggestions to look up a certain video dating back to the Nixon presidency that could be beneficial to their efforts in print. So, I'll leave a link below for you for this. Concerning her life of deceit, it's on the State of the Nation.